And, but she said he stopped taking her out because she's always getting.
That is a horrible picture.
Oh, so they're gonna start cycling. That's pretty bad.
Okay.
I never knew her when she was that.
I didn't either. Look at
I
that.
can't. Did you really? Catherine, I got my first day in college in 1969. I'm Gabby Horn.
Oh,
And
Put Facebook with you.
yes.
Yes.
She was a year before me in college, but we both were geology majors. We both were
Oh, that's how I remember.
you betcha, and we both were interested in theater, and then later we both went to libraries.
Wow.
Yes.
Thank you for coming.
Why would we not?
The other thing is, I don't know that many people, so I don't know, people, the word gets around. I don't know. how many
Sylvia
people
Marquez
know.
sent me an email.
Okay.
Sylvia also, we all three of us met the first day of college in 1969.
Yeah, she was taking the bus from home.
Yeah.
I was still at home. I was still at
Later, my last year of college, I took the bus from Fox to Phoenix.
Between our first cry and our last breath, we string together precious moments of life as pearls on a string. Then something or someone breaks the strand and the pearls scatter everywhere. And we are on our knees on the floor trying to retrieve something that is precious and is now lost. A human life cannot be restrung. But we can gather together the precious memories in deep gratitude for the time we did have together. I refuse to believe that either God or the universe is cruel. That is a human failing. Instead, I trust that nothing is ever lost. All past and present make up this moment. We gather together today to celebrate the life and mourn the death of Mary Catherine Politz. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a wife, and an ex-wife. She was kind and considerate, a costume designer and a librarian. To say that another way, and if there was ever a phrase that I could think of that better encapsulated who MK was, she was a curator of this world. My name is Nathan. I'm one of the ministers here at MK's church. I am honored and welcome you here. I had known MK for the entire 10 years that I was here. She may have joined right when I got here, I don't remember, but for the duration of my ministry here, she has been a part of it. And she always sat in that corner over there. Right? Yep. She always made her, this is hard to articulate, she always made her presence known without ever demanding too much. She would share what she struggled with and what she wanted and what she was appreciative for, but always in an attempt to not make too big of a splash. MK was raised Catholic, and I'm not exactly sure when she left the church or became a Unitarian Universalist. Similarly, she never articulated any beliefs to me about God or the lack thereof or an afterlife, but she would often welcome prayer. MK was always interested in the arts. In many ways, she was a modern Renaissance woman. How many of you know she has a Master of Fine Arts in costume design? All right, so about half of you. And for those of you online, this is for you as well. She collected fabrics. Librarian was probably a fitting vocation for her. She gave her career to making sure other people had access to the world. The last few years of her life were not great for MK. And this is the point in a service where you need to know that every memorial service, it is okay to let the fullness of the person out. She really struggled being in that nursing home, and more specifically, leaving her house. To the best that I can figure, MK always struggled with letting things go and transitions, and she struggled letting go of some of the things she collected over the years that eventually made it so she couldn't live in her home anymore. This does not define her. But how she lived with her struggles and still remained as joyful and considerate with them, how she stayed so engaged in this world, that does define her. So today, in this service, let the fullness of Mary Catherine Politz come through. Everyone deserves that when we die. To not be defined entirely by our strengths or our failings, but simply as beautiful and complicated people. And it is true that she deserved better than she experienced in the end of her life. So many of us do. Although she went through the pandemic and her health turned, and even still, she still had friends and church members and family who were with her. She did not go through this alone. None of us do. Because in this church, I cannot make any promises about the afterlife or where her soul is, I will tell you what I do know. I know that her body was made up of elements that have existed since the beginning of time. These elements have made up stars and oceans and trees and rocks, and for a very brief few decades, they came together to make up her. These atoms have moved on, and they will go on to make other amazing things. And while her life has ended, today, through us honoring her memory, we let her live on through us. Today, all of the hymns are going to be from the hymnal. The first two are the gray, that's the hardcover hymnal, and the third one, under your seat, is where we hide the hymnals. The third one is going to be in the teal softback hymnal. So the first one is number 38. I'll give you a minute to find it. And then go ahead and rise in body or spirit. If you need a hymnal, wave. And Mijai, would you pass out some hymnals if people need them? The way that we start a service in the Unitarian Universalist Church, in many Unitarian Universalist churches, is by lighting a chalice. So I'd like to invite MK's brother Sam up to light the chalice. And we say together words printed in your order of service. With hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love. We were looking for a reading that encapsulated who MK was. And the reading that was read at her burial, it was from Matthew. It's the Beatitudes. So we're going to share it here as well. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after, he sat down. His disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. The way that we're going to do her eulogy is not in the traditional chronological sense. We're going to invite 4 people up who knew Mary Catherine in different settings to give you snapshots of who she was. She will not be memorialized from up here. It is impossible to retell someone's story in a service or in an hour. She will, however, be memorialized through you. As you hear her story, as you hear music or readings that remind you of her, she will be alive in you. Physiologically, your body will release the same chemicals it did when she was standing in front of you. So we memorialize her from the gathered congregation. So the goal here is not completeness. It's to just provide you opportunities to think of her for this hour. So first I'd like to invite Mary Caruth to come up.
Good morning. I was just thinking that, speaking of Mary Catherine often sitting in the back, that she would love this service. And she would feel so honored, and she would enjoy every bit of it. I've known Mary Catherine for a very long time. I met her back in 1989 in a graduate course on feminist theory at LSU, a very high theory class. And then I left Baton Rouge after about 5 years and lived in New Orleans. Eventually, I got my degree and moved away. So I came back to Baton Rouge 10 years ago. There had been almost, I guess, a 20-year span between the time we knew each other. But Mary Catherine and I picked up our friendship again, and I actually started writing a letter to her last night because I really didn't know what to say. And I finally just understood that I should be simple. And I appreciate Nathan's comparison of a person's life to a string of beads, that we can do our best to restring or remember snapshots, as he said. And that's really what I've done. I've just written down some words that have come to mind when I think of her, not in any order necessarily. She was humble. She was an egalitarian. I remember her memory of being cared for sometimes by a black man on the plantation, which I think you'll hear about from Sam, where her father worked as a farm manager. And as a very small child, a toddler, even still in diapers, her having memories of this man looking after her, and how much she thought back on this and appreciated it. So even though she was raised, in the 50s and 60s in southwestern Louisiana, initially in a plantation system, she nevertheless was very, very much an egalitarian. She had eclectic interests, which Nathan touched on. She was a librarian, and I learned from her that many librarians are eclectic people. And I also learned that librarians aren't just strict, shushing types of people, that they even dance, they have parties, things like that. But she actually got her bachelor's in earth sciences, then went to Texas, to Austin, and got her MLS in library science, and then later got her costume MFA, and then later got her PhD in theater. And she was good at math, she was good at fixing things, so she was very eclectic. She was a lifelong learner. And speaking of her humbleness, she loved to learn from other people, whether they had a formal teacher role, professor role, or not. She was humble in that way. There was always something for her to learn. She was wise. She was funny. She even had dreams of becoming a stand-up comedian. She was quirky. She had a quirky mind. She was very truthful, often even blunt, tenacious, and we saw that in her recovery after the stroke. She really wouldn't be defeated, and when I went with her to the emergency room after the stroke, she was flexing her arm, the one that had been affected, right there, just trying to start recovering. She was an animal lover, and I think of Emily Dickinson's poem. There's a line in it about experiencing a transport of cordiality with other creatures, including snakes, to the point that even a possum who got into our house one day, she was able to finally get it out, and I think a friend filled in the hole that the possum had gotten through, but even that possum, I think she treated with some cordiality. She was a weaver. She even had a loom. She had a lot of different hobbies. And I think, though, that she loved the idea maybe of weaving, and she liked having the network of people that she would correspond with about weaving. She loved film nights with Nels. Before I returned to Baton Rouge, when I was away, I always heard about the film nights with Nels, and now I'm part of that. And I appreciate a lot of the interesting people that MK knew. She knew a lot of people in the area. She was a people person, and she and I and Sumita, who's here, we three were Gemini, air signs, and had a lunch every year to celebrate our birthdays in May and June. She was definitely an air sign. She had drama in her life, even though she was a drama PhD. I mean drama with a big D. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, but definitely the drama was there. And we enjoyed telling the stories about such drama after it happened. The story of her dog, Buddy, being transported across the country to a whole new home because he had broken the law by eating the neighbor's chicken. And a good friend of MK's from her childhood drove that dog all the way across the country. He was going to be captured possibly in Baton Rouge if they didn't do that. And now he's with a good owner, which MK knew about, and can run a lot, and he was a big dog, so he needed to do that. But she did let go of him. She knew she had to, and to make him happy. Mary Catherine also, in my return here, identified herself as queer, and that was new to me. And what she meant by that was not in terms of her attractions or relationships, but in terms of her outlook. And so she has evolved. She was an evolving person, and even though she liked staying in the same area with the same people and so on all her life, she did evolve spiritually and emotionally and as a person over time. So one thing that Mary Catherine would say to me when I would have angst, and confide in her, is she would say, "You're loved." She wouldn't say, "I love you." She'd say, "You're loved." and sort of a universal statement. And that, of course, was very comforting to me. And so what I want her to know today is that she's loved.
Next, we're going to invite Kathy Randalls up.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kathy Randalls, and I drove up from New Orleans this morning, so I apologize for being a little late. The storm is here. I think that the skies are crying, as we are, for Mary Catherine today. And yeah, so I first met, Mary Catherine was one of our co-directors with the Drama Club at the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women. And I first met Mary Catherine when she was, I think she was already working on the PhD. It was 1996 at LSU. And I did a performance there called Rage Within Without that was all about anger, aggression, and violence in women and why women kill. And she stayed to talk to me after the performance, and I had just started working at LCIW. And I think in the post-performance talkback I mentioned that, that I needed help with that. And she heard the call, and she said, I would love to help you with that. What can I do? And so basically for the rest of her days, as long as she was able, she came to LCIW every Saturday morning. And I don't see any of those women here today, but hopefully some of y'all are watching online. And all of them are remembering her and remembering the love and support that she gave. She gave a lot of her life to those women and to the work that we did together. And yes, she was quirky. And yes, she always told the truth and her version of the truth and her experience of life. She shared that very honestly and clearly and comically often. One of the things that she brought to the drama club in the early days, she did, there was a series of monologues called Talking With, and there was also a gospel play called Woman Thou Art Loosed, and she brought all of her theater learning that she had done at LSU with her to the prison, and the women loved it. And I also want to share that there's this line in working with the criminal legal system and with prisons of those on the inside and those on the outside. And I have never been incarcerated. I've only worked with women who have been incarcerated. But there's something that those of us who come from the outside in, we experience in the drama club and in other organizations like this. The line between inside and outside disappears. We are people. We are human beings together, sharing that love and feeling that we are loved. And Mary Catherine brought that. Mary Catherine did not see herself as separate from those women. Many of us say, there by the grace of God go I, in terms of people who end up being incarcerated. As I hope you all know that not everyone who ends up incarcerated is even guilty of what they received a sentence for. I know this is a Unitarian church, so y'all have some progressive views here that I share. And yeah, she became family. She was a sister, a mother, a quirky auntie, a daughter to many of those women. And we did ask her regularly about Buddy. And several of the women, me included, were concerned that the buddy dynamic had become similar to an abusive marriage dynamic. And I know it's kind of wrong to make fun of something like that, but you know, when people have had experiences like that and they see it happening, they call it out, and also call it out with a wry sense of humor. So we went that deep in the drama club, and we were able to express our love and concern for Mary Catherine when Buddy would knock her down, and also laugh about it. It's my first time seeing you, Sam. It's nice to meet you. I see y'all's eyes. And yeah, when we found out about the stroke, I was able to visit her a couple of times, and some of the other drama club members were able to visit her a couple of times in the assisted living center. And we tried really hard to get her to come. The work of the women on the inside has translated to work on the outside with an organization called The Graduates, which is an ensemble of formerly incarcerated women who perform stories about their lives. And Mary Catherine was able to see some of our performances that we did here in Baton Rouge at the Red Shoes. So yeah, I just wanted to share a little window of where Mary Catherine spent her Saturdays for at least 2 decades. She really gave of her heart and herself and her humor, her knowledge, her generosity, her compassion to hundreds of women in our state that came through the drama club's doors. And I just want to share a little song that we wrote with the drama club in honor of Mary Catherine today. Here it is. Life is what you make it, and life is happiness. Life is where you're going, and life is where you've been. Now, I know this is a Unitarian church, and I'm a Baptist, but I'm going to sing it one more time, and I want to invite y'all, if you feel so moved, to either hum or sing along with me, if y'all don't mind, and send it up to Mary Catherine that she continue to transition into her divine form away from this earthly form, and that she continue to bless us with her beautiful spirit as long into the eternal. Life is what you make it. Life is happiness. Life is where you're going, and life is where you've been. One more time. Life is what you make it, and life is happiness. Life is where you're going, and life is where you've been. We love you, Mary Catherine.
Now I'll invite up Joanne Freiling, a member of this church.
Well, I don't know about all of you, but I get the feeling Mary Catherine's right here with her arms out hugging us all. That was just wonderful. I love memorial services. I find out about the people I care about so much. There's so much more to know than I've ever experienced, and it's just great. My experience with Mary Catherine just started, excuse me, allergy, not COVID, when I went to library school. My husband had passed away, and I decided, that would be an interesting thing to do. I had an elementary education background, and I was assured you can become a librarian with any kind of background. So I went, and when I got there, I realized I didn't know a thing about libraries. It just seemed like, I like libraries, so I thought I better take a class in what libraries are about. And so I took Mary Catherine's class. She was teaching in reference department at Middleton. I referred to this class as Books and Berries. And it was introduction to library science. What they tried to do is teach you how to use library resources for writing a paper, doing research and stuff. And I looked out and had Mary Catherine as my teacher. The word quirky's been used by everybody, and can you just imagine how much fun it is to take a class with her? She was just wonderful. And after that, I went to library school and had a temporary job at Middleton and worked with her in reference. And I got to know her pretty well, not as well as some of the people that knew her earlier, but we had a good time together. And in fact, one day we decided to go to the beach. We needed a weekend off, and so we went and rented a place in Florida, right by the water. We were tired after the drive, so I thought, oh dear, too tired to get on the beach yet, so let's do something. So we each, unknown to the other, got out our little water heater, the little, metal coil, you plug it in, you heat it. We each got out our espresso, our little cone, and we made ourselves a cup of coffee. I was stunned that she knew how to do it. I'm sure she was stunned that I did. But it was just perfect. Well, then we got on our bathing suits, ran to the beach in time to see a wall of water coming up the beach towards us. So that was that day at the beach. But after that, we had a real nice time, and we had a chance to really talk about what we thought about things. Our beliefs, what we cared about, what mattered. And I think we came to realize that the two of us thought very similarly to what I feel like brought me to the Unitarian Church. So it was no surprise when Charlie and I were at the greeter table one day, and she comes walking up, and she said, I decided this is where my home has to be. It was just so perfect. It wasn't that much longer, though, that she went to the church auction. And right after the auction, she went back to her house all by herself, and that's when she had her stroke. And it certainly changed her life forever. All the joy she had in drama and friends and all the fun things, everything became so difficult. And more so. A group of people from church went over to her house, and we kind of cleaned it up, painted walls, and tried to make it so that it would be easier for her to live there. But it got so to the point where she just couldn't, had to go to a nursing home. And so we would take turns taking her from the nursing home to church because she really always wanted to come. She liked seeing people, she liked the message she heard, she liked the singing. It just worked for her. So it was very sad when she got to the point where that wasn't even possible. But she never really changed. She was still the same sweet, kind, I don't want to be a trouble to anybody kind of a person. Always had nice things to say, right to the very end. And it's an inspiration for all of us who can find lots of things to complain about. She had so many more than any of us probably, I hope, ever will. And she never complained about it. She always smiled and asked, how are you doing? So she's a love. She always will be, and we'll always love her like crazy.
I'd like to invite Sam to come up.
So first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. And I'd like to thank Nathan for all his help in setting this up. I had no idea who would be here, but it's wonderful to see you all. And I thought I would talk about what it was like growing up with Mary Catherine, because this is kind of a thing that I have uniquely, is that I was her little brother. She was my big sister. And you may not know a lot about how we grew up and what we did. So I'll just start right from the beginning. My parents grew up and came of age during the Depression. And they went through all that, being single. They went through World War II being single. And like many others whose plans had been displaced by those events, they eventually got together and got married in 1949 after the war. At that time, my father was a sugarcane overseer on one of the Gacho sugar plantations, in particular the one in Reserve. There was a plantation called Belterre that he was the overseer on. And Mama was a secretary in the office at Gacho Sugars in Reserve. And that's how they met. There was a community club there that had dances, and I suspect that they met at one of those dances. And they got together, and finally, after their dreams being delayed, and they're thinking maybe it would never come to pass that they could have a family, they got married in 1948. And my father got moved to a different Gacho plantation at Laplace. And Mary Catherine was born in 1949, and I was born in 1951. When Mama was in the hospital with Mary Catherine, after labor and delivery, she was in a room with another woman named Frances Johnson, who had just had a little boy named Carl. And they got to know each other, and they decided they would stay in touch. And so all through my childhood, we would periodically get together with the Johnson family and their kids. They had 3 boys, and Mary Catherine and me. And they lived in New Orleans, and so we loved to go to New Orleans to visit them. And they had never been out in the country, so her kids loved to come out to the country and see what things were like on the plantation. So that was an aspect of growing up. We got together with those folks. And the house that we lived in was an amazing house. It was an old Creole cottage, a big one. It was off the ground on brick pillars. You could walk around underneath it. It didn't look fancy on the outside. Yesterday I visited my cousin Janice, who lives in Mandeville, and we drove around and looked at all the Creole cottages on the lakefront, really fancy ones. This one didn't look fancy on the inside, but boy, was it nice on the inside. You walked through these glass doors in the front, and you entered a big, long parlor with cypress planks about this wide, polished, and the typical bead and cove paneling on the walls. And it was really a great place to live. In addition, it was situated on several acres of land. And around the house, there was a small yard with a chain link fence around it. And that's where it was safe for us to play. But outside of that, it seemed huge to me. Of course, I was a child. But there were several acres of land, and there were cows and bulls in that pasture. And so we couldn't go out there without Mama and Daddy. So our little world was inside the chain link fence and inside this house. And this was at a turn in the river road in Laplace, where the river road turned away from the river and the levee, because the land was very low there and marshy. And so we were isolated. On one side, we had nothing but sugarcane fields, and on the other side, we had one neighbor, and then nothing but sugarcane fields. So we lived in this splendid isolation on the plantation. The first speaker mentioned this man who took care of Mary Catherine. Mary, you mentioned that. And his name was Tineg, and he was actually the yard man that worked and helped with the garden and milking the cows and stuff like that. And he really was attached to Mary Catherine. I remember that. I have a picture of him sitting next to her on the front steps. You know, so it had this grand staircase going up to the front. The other thing that was great about the house, if you were a kid growing up, is that the gallery along the whole front of the house was covered by the roof, so it was shaded, and it was also screened in. So you could play there just about any season. It wouldn't get too hot in the summer, and we had our tricycles and things like that on the porch, and we just had a ball playing on that porch. So when I was born, of course, Mary Catherine had been there for a few years, so I remember that she knew everything about that house. She knew all the nooks and crannies and good places to play. So she showed me what you could do there. For instance, there was underneath the house, I mentioned you could walk around. In the middle of the underneath of the house, there was this bricked-in room. And my father used to keep his sweet potatoes in there. He'd dig sweet potatoes and he'd put them in there. It was like a root cellar. But the rest of it, you could walk around it, but you could only get in from the back of the house, and all the other sides were trellised, so you couldn't get in. So I was always afraid to go in there. I was afraid that I would run around the back of that bricked-in room and a monster would get me. And Mary Catherine had to reassure me that that was not the case. That she said, "Oh, I go in there all the time. You don't have to worry about that." We had a swing set on the side of the house, and I remember once Mary Catherine, she liked to swing really high, and she swung really high once and forgot to hold on. So she went flying through the air and just kind of tumbled when she hit the ground. Mama saw that and she got so scared, she made Mary Catherine come in and lie on a mattress in the hall for a while, and we were looking at each other. "There's not anything wrong with you, is there?" "No, not really." But that's the way Mama was. So, okay, so what did we do in this splendid isolation? We did not live in a neighborhood where you could go visit other kids. You couldn't walk or ride a bike to go visit other kids. You know, everything else was miles away. So what did we do? We read. So Mama read us the golden books, all those wonderful golden books, terrific stories. And so by the time we got to school, we knew how to read. And I'm looking at the first grade reading book, and I'm going, what is all this Dick and Jane and See Spot Run? Come on, give me something to read, you know? So she also did something very important. She got us this encyclopedia called the Book of Knowledge, okay? And the Book of Knowledge was a different kind of encyclopedia. It was not arranged alphabetically like the World Book Encyclopedia or Encyclopedia Britannica. Instead, it was arranged in sections according to topics. So one of the topics I remember was things to make and do. And they'd have all these little projects that you could do, make things with simple materials. And also they had things like articles on nature and how things work, you know. For example, they had an article on how bridges are built. and they talked about these things called caissons, which were these concrete pillars that they would put in the river and sink them down, and people could get inside and go down to the bottom and dig. And when they finally hit bedrock, then they would fill the whole thing up with concrete. Well, you know, they built the Sunshine Bridge, and they had the caissons there. So I knew all about that from reading about it in the books of knowledge. So we knew a lot of stuff, even though we didn't encounter a lot of other people. One thing I remember is our trips to New Orleans. We always went to New Orleans to get shoes and eyeglasses. Those were the things we did. And so we never got off of Canal Street. We would go to Crest, and we'd go to Woolworths, and we would get little toys and things like that. And I remember we went to the lunch counter at Crest and Woolworths, and we'd sit there, and man, that was cool. That was really fun, you know. And then if we got to go at Christmas time, it was always fun because we could look at all the department store windows, how they were decorated. Remember Mr. Bingle in the Maison Blanche store? So I hope I'm not boring you with all this, but this is what our lives were like, okay? So when Mary Catherine was 9 and I was 7, we got a piano. My father talked to a junk dealer who had an old upright piano, and he bought it for $50 and put it in that big front room. And we took lessons from a man named Cecil Plow, who was the band director at Destrehan High School, and he was noteworthy because he had been a band member in John Philip Sousa's band. So he was a good teacher. Okay, so we were pretty happy there, and we thought that was where we were going to grow up, you know. So I remember I was home one day. I'm not sure why I was home, because I would have been in the 3rd grade when this happened. But I was home, and these 2 men came to visit my parents, and my father and my mother were both home, which was unusual because he was usually always out working in the fields. And these 2 men came in, and they had ties on. They were all dressed up. I never saw anybody with a tie on unless it was in church on Sunday. So that was really unusual, and they seemed to be having a really serious discussion. And what it turned out was they were telling my parents that my father was no longer going to have a job because they were buying all the land that Gautreaux Sugars owned, and they were going to develop it. And they owned a shell company called Gulf States Land and Industries. And you know what Laplace and Reserve and those areas are like now. They're all petrochemical industries and commercial development and low-income housing. Well, that's where we lived. So we were not sure what we were going to do. So we had to move out of the house. We moved all this stuff out of the house, and we stayed with our mère in Reserve. And for Mary Catherine and me, that was great. We loved visiting her because she had this old house. She spoke French to my mother, so we got to hear them speak French to each other. She had pickup sticks. We could play pickup sticks on the floor. She had this illustrated history of the Civil War with all of the original daguerreotype photographs in it. And man, I used to pore over that. So we really had a good time visiting her. And we were there for a couple of weeks. We had to go to switch schools and go to school in Reserve for a couple of weeks. Eventually, Daddy was able to find a job on Bayou Lafourche near Donaldsonville at a plantation called Belle Alliance. And this plantation was one of the plantations that still had an old antebellum mansion that's still there. And we lived in this old Creole shack next to the Bell Alliance mansion. And the house was really decrepit. The roof leaked, the pipes would break in the wintertime because they weren't insulated. There were a couple of rooms that didn't have any heat. It was really kind of a miserable place to live. There was an attic that was closed off, and you could hear rats running around up there. So eventually, after a couple of years, they built us a nice little concrete block house on the same property. And in fact, that was lucky because it was just before the two hurricanes that we experienced, Hilda and Betsy, that we were in that house. And one thing that was good is that this house was near Napoleonville, which was where my father was from, so we had all of our aunts and uncles were in the area, and we got to meet that side of the family. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to talk about is stuff that we did as a result of changes in technology, and the main change in technology was getting a TV. So we got a TV in 1957 when we were in Laplace, and first of all, on Sundays we would always watch Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color, okay, which was not in color on our TV because it was a black and white TV. But we also went to see Cinderella. That's the first movie I ever saw. We went to see Cinderella together. And so we loved watching TV. So when we moved to the Donaldsonville area, another great thing about that was that there was a library there. There was a public library there. And we used to go to the library every week. Mama would take us to the library every week, and we would check out books and read them. And one of the books that Mary Catherine read was a book called Isle Royale Calling. And I have to step down because I forgot to bring the book up to the podium. Okay, and Mary Catherine really loved this book, and she wanted me to read it, and I refused to read it. It was like the thing of anything you touch, I don't touch, you know. So I never read it. But after she passed away this summer, I decided to get a copy. So I found a used copy, and here it is in its typical celluloid library binding. And I read this book, and it was about a forest ranger on an island in Lake Superior who, his son was a ham radio operator, and the plot revolved around him helping a ship that was in distress by talking to the radio operator on the ship and then talking to the officials who sent help to rescue the crew. Okay, but when I got this copy of the book, the thing that amazed me was I looked at the blurb on the back about the author, and it reminded me so much of Mary Catherine. So I want to read a little bit of this. She was a Class A radio operator. She studied journalism and creative writing at Northwestern, library science at Marquette College. She received a BA from the University of Los Angeles. She taught creative writing. She taught radio for the U.S. Air Force during World War II. She operated her own beauty shop, worked on the staff of the Escanaba Daily Press. She worked for a radio station. She also taught in a dancing school, was a pianist in dance band, played pipe organ in a theater, all of this stuff. And I said, I wonder if Mary Catherine got some of her ideas about doing all the things that she did from this book. In addition, when I read the book, I realized that there was a character in there who was a young female school teacher who was interested in things like botany and archaeology. She liked to collect Indian artifacts and that sort of thing. So I'm going, okay, I'm hearing Mary Catherine talking to me right here. You know, she's talking to me. Okay, so remember the bad old days of the early 60s? There was the Cuban Missile Crisis. There was John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King's assassination. Okay? And we needed a lift from that. So in 1963 and 1964, the Beatles became popular. And Mary Catherine loved the Beatles. Her favorite Beatle was John Lennon, okay, hands down. And so we got his books, the books that he wrote in his own right, and A Spaniard in the Works, and we read those books and we loved them. And we also went to the little movie theater in Donaldsonville, and we got to see A Hard Day's Night and Help, and Mary Catherine and I were over the moon with that stuff. We just love the Beatles. There are a few TV shows we like. One of the TV shows that we liked was The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. Anybody remember that? Yes. Yeah, and we love that. You know, there was this character, Dobie Gillis, and he was a high school student, and he had all these plans. He was going to be rich, and he was going to marry a beautiful girl and have a fabulous life. But he never could do any of that, you know. And he would have these little episodes where he would break the fourth wall and talk to the audience and talk about all of his plans. And he had, there was a girl who really liked him named Zelda, and Zelda wanted to mother him. She wanted to take care of him. So we really liked that. And there was Bob Denver, who played this guy named Maynard G. Krebs. Maynard G. Krebs was a beatnik, and whenever anyone would say the word work, he would go, work, like that. I see some nods out in the audience, so this is encouraging me that I'm not out of line in telling these stories. Okay. So, it was a good thing that we had all those years together through high school, because later on, we didn't see each other very much. When I went to LSU, I graduated 2 years after Mary Catherine graduated from Nichols, and I went out to California to go to graduate school, and when Mary Catherine went to UT Austin to go to library school, that was the last time that we really got together and had a really good time together. So I managed to get a ride out to Austin to visit her. And she was all crazy about Jerry Jeff Walker at the time. She really loved the song Mr. Bojangles. She asked me if I wanted to see some music, because even back then, Austin was a good place for music. And we went to see a Texas country blues singer called, his name was Mance Lipscomb. And I even got to ask him to play a song for me, and he played a song that I knew. And we went to New Braunfels and got barbecue with her and a bunch of friends. And she and her boyfriend and I went swimming in Lake Travis, and we swam much farther than I'd ever swum before in my life, to this little secret beach where we hung out. And that was really a good time. Mary Catherine was having a lot of fun in library school and had a lot of friends. And I felt like she was really happy and doing well. And so once I went out to UCLA for graduate school, I was pretty busy, and I only got back home on holidays, you know. So you guys actually know her a lot better than I do as an adult. Of course, I came back and saw her, and I was with her quite a bit towards the end. When she was in the nursing home, she basically would call me every day and talk to me. And that was wonderful. But I wanted to conclude by reading something that's from her doctoral dissertation in theater. And this is another case where I felt like I can hear Mary Catherine talking to me. Okay, this is what she wrote. Mary Catherine Politz grew up in South Louisiana, excelled in school, and had no idea what to do with her life. She attended Nicholls State University and studied library science at the University of Texas in Austin as a way to order the universe, or at least her universe. Following graduation with a Master of Library Science, she worked as a librarian in public libraries in Houma and New Orleans. She developed library sciences for Louisiana University's Marine Consortium, otherwise known as LUMCON, and that was in Cocodrie. She became a science librarian in the reference department at the Middleton Library at LSU. She studied at the library school at LSU and got a certificate in library science. And currently she's a reference librarian with the reference department at the Goodwood branch of the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. In between stints in libraries where she makes a somewhat decent living, she has done theater. She learned all her practical theatrical skills at Le Petit Théâtre de Terrebonne and in Houma and at the New Orleans Opera Scenic Studios. She has acted in New Orleans at University of New Orleans and at the Contemporary Arts Center. She received a Master of Fine Arts in Directing and Costume Design from University of New Orleans. She has directed at Le Petit Théâtre de Terrebonne, University of New Orleans, Louisiana State University, and Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women. She has been an artist in the schools for the Greater Baton Rouge Arts Council. One thing that she didn't mention is that she liked to spin. She would spin yarn, and she had a really nice spinning wheel. And she got hired by Oak Alley to dress in a period costume and sit on the gallery in the front and spin. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. You know, I don't know what else to say. I feel like Mary Catherine is still going. and of course I miss her, and I'm sure you all miss her, but what a lucky person I am to have been her brother. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and sing this next hymn. It's 101 in your hymnal, right where you're seated. We won't stand because we're going to sing again in a minute. Would you all join me in a moment of prayer and reflection? The God that we know and we see love and kindness and family, mystery believed in, not named and unnamed. Hold us together and hold Mary Catherine wherever she is. Hold her soul, hold her memory. Help us to know that while she is gone, she is not gone. Help us to let her live on through us. Help us to live kinder, more generous lives. Amen. So I'd like us to close with a little bit of a litany. With each of these, I will ask you to respond with, we will remember her. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we will remember her. In the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, we will remember her. In the opening of buds and the rebirth of spring, we will remember her. In the blueness of sky and the heat of summer, we will remember her. In the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn, we will remember her. When we rescue an animal, we will remember her. When we share the world with someone else, we will remember her. So long as we live, she too shall live. Mary Catherine Politz lived on this earth for more than 70 years. She loved, cared, curated, and brought joy and acceptance to many. After a series of health declines, her body has given all that it can. She was buried next to her parents at St. James Church in Belrose. That's her childhood church. So while MK's life here has ended, her impact will live on through all of us, through our stories, through how we love and care for the world we hold, and with how we carry her legacy going forward. May she be at peace. May you know peace. Amen. Let's go ahead and sing. We got to lift this up a little. The teal hymnal is number 1064. That's the soft. Mija's got some extra.
Rise as you're able.
Oh Well, Mary Catherine has joined the ranks of everybody who has ever existed in the history of this world. Her memory lives on through you. Go in peace. Go in love. Amen.